watching ASEAN Business Report. Now catching up with the Philippines, as Bloomberg chief said that the Philippines' growing momentum in the economic growth is due to a large degree to the Aquino administration, whose policy has given local and foreign businessmen fresh impetus to invest in the country. Bloomberg LP chair Peter Grower said that the Philippines was in an enviable position vis-a-vis other countries around the world that lacked leadership at a time of great economic uncertainty. He believes that leadership is a key differentiator, and the Philippines today has quite a strong leadership. This will allow the country to move forward in a thoughtful and solid pace of growth. In general, the growth of Bloomberg's business in the ASEAN region at an average of 14% in 2012 for Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Singapore has outstripped the Financial Service Organization's global average growth rate of 0.5%. Grower added he believed that the growth rate reflected the actual and potential expansion of local economy.
Now let's take a look at a DBS report on the forecast of the Philippine economy this year. Let's take a look.
The Philippine economy is expected to be strong this year, with GDP growth forecast to reach 6% in 2013 and 2014, according to DBS Bank from Singapore. Last year, the Philippines achieved a full-year growth of 6.6%. Making it the fastest growing in Southeast Asia. The economy has shown resilience, a sharp contrast from 2009. DBS cited three factors for the resilience. First, non-electronics manufacturing was able to offset the slump in electronics. Second, the service sector performed well, with the financial intermediation and the real estate, rent, and business activities components registering growth of 7.2% and 7.7% year-on-year, respectively. Third, there is currently a construction revival underway for the Philippines. DBS said the Philippine economy is going through a period of high growth and low inflation that stretched from the first quarter last year. The same trend is expected until the third quarter this year. While growth remained high, inflation stood at only 3.1% last year and is expected to stay low with an average of 3.8%. The Philippine Central Bank is targeting an inflation band of between 3 to 5% for this year and next. Momentum in the domestic economy remains strong, with private consumption growth averaging 1.7% quarter-on-quarter over the last 3 quarters of 2012. Consumer confidence rose to a 2-year high in the last quarter last year. Car sales in particular rose sharply over the last few months. The Singapore-based bank said the current Philippine government has helped to transform the country's image as an investment destination through reforming its fiscal activities, cracking down on corruption, and introducing many private-public partnership projects. So far, only 2 projects were awarded, namely the Danghari-South Luzon Link Road and School Infrastructure Project, while 6 other projects are still undergoing the bidding phase. Construction on these infrastructure projects will help boost gross fixed capital formation growth, which makes up around 20% of GDP. Government spending should remain high in the first half of this year, before decreasing slightly in the second half.
Now let's shift our focus to Laos. Laos is considering single-entry visas to streamline tourist entry in the hope to attract more visitors and driving growth in the industry. Neighboring Thailand and Cambodia recently signed an agreement to allow foreign tourists to enter either country using one visa, making the 2 countries the first in the region to introduce the scheme. A Lao delegation plans to visit Cambodia possibly at the end of this month to study Cambodia's experience regarding the single visa scheme and the procedures involved. There have been repeated calls from business across the region encouraging their governments to introduce a single visa policy. As travel agents said, it would encourage many more people to visit Laos and generate more economic benefit than loss. However, there has been recommendation for a mechanism to share the visa fee, otherwise Laos could be disadvantaged. One potential disadvantage was that Laos is usually considered by tourists as a second destination rather than their primary one, so the visa fee would be collected by the first country visited. Laos does not have direct flights to many countries, but others in the region do. Tourists could simply pay for a visa in one of those countries and travel to Laos, meaning other countries would benefit while Laos would lose out.
Continuing with Malaysia, as the Malaysian Prime Minister presented an impressive report card for the implementation of the ambitious National Transformation Program. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak said the government transformation program and the economic transformation program, which support Malaysia's vision to emerge as a high-income advanced nation, not merely improve the economic indicators. He added that the country's success can be seen through the higher per capita gross domestic product, or GDP, from $257 in 1957 to $9,970 last year. This is nearly 4,000% increase in more than 5 decades. Najib said that the higher quality of life was clearly evident from the household income survey figures, which showed that average monthly household income in Malaysia has increased from 4,025 Malaysian ringgit, or about $1,280 in 2009, to 5,000 Malaysian ringgit, or $1,600 last year.
Japanese food services company and largest karaoke operator Shidex Corp said it will start catering services for corporate customers in Vietnam by forming a capital tie-up with a local economy. Shidex said it will acquire 35% of the outstanding shares in Galaxy TSC Co., a Ho Chi Minh City-based catering firm that now provides an average of 50,000 meals a day, mainly to Japanese firms and factories operating in the fast-growing country. With the investment, Shidex said it will become the first foreign company to enter Vietnam's catering industry since the country became a member of the World Trade Organization in 2007. The Vietnamese firm's name will be changed to Galaxy Shidex Co., the Japanese firm said, adding that it aims to provide at least 200,000 meals a day in 2017. Shidex wants a foothold in Vietnam in light of growing corporate needs for catering services, especially among Japanese manufacturers setting up bases in and around Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City.
And now, still staying with Vietnam, let's hear from the JP Morgan and its review on the economic and political issues in Vietnam.
JP Morgan has introduced the latest Asia-Pacific equity research concerning economic and political reviews in Vietnam. The State Bank of Vietnam reported that the total public debt of Vietnam is now over $71.749 billion, equivalent to 49.4% of the country's GDP, and an average debt load of $800 per person. External public debt is over $50.165 billion, up from $47.468 billion in 2012 and $44.34 billion in 2011. Previously, according to the Ministry of Finance, Vietnam's public debt was still in the safe zone as it remained lower than the maximum threshold at 65% of the country's GDP, which the government sets for 2011 to 2020 period. According to Vietnam News Agency, the country incurred a state budget deficit of 24.035 trillion Vietnamese dong, or around $1.15 billion in the first 2 months of the year, or 14.2% of the full-year estimate. The state budget revenue was estimated at 114.8 trillion Vietnamese dong, or around $5.49 billion during the period, falling by 1.9% from a year earlier. Ministry of Planning and Investment released a revised number for registered FDI showing a 23% upward revision. The actual registered FDI in 2012 was $16 billion, up from the earlier released figure of $13 billion. Manufacturing and processing remained the most attractive sectors for FDI, constituting 71.6% of total FDI, followed by real estate with $2 billion or 12.3% of total registered FDI. The central bank considers reassigning credit growth limits for each individual bank this year based on its tier. This aims to improve credit growth of banks without a negative impact on system liquidity. According to the State Bank of Vietnam, again, non-performing loans in Vietnam banks dropped to 6% from 8% in December 2012. No reasons for the sharp decline were given. According to a new regulation posted on the State Bank of Vietnam website, Vietnam's central bank will put some banks under special surveillance because they risk losing payment ability or have serious violations that could lead to insecurity in operations. The central bank will monitor daily operations of such banks. The governor will have the right to demand the banks boost share capital, propose a restructuring plan, or force them to undergo M&A with others in case they cannot boost capital on their own. According to Bloomberg, the new regulations will take effect on April 27th. The central bank again promulgated loan classification, in which a new regulation will take effect on June 1st this year. Tightened regulation on loans will lead to higher provisions at banks, which in turn will likely have an impact on the profitability of banks in the second half. According to local press, MOF is considering lowering the corporate income tax and VAT rate for several sectors. According to the draft, the fiscal stimulus package worth 43 trillion Vietnamese dong may include tax breaks for around 34 trillion Vietnamese dong and 9 trillion Vietnamese dong tax reduction. The VAT reduction proposed for social housing is 250 billion Vietnamese dong in 2013 until the next year, and support for low-income home buyers is 300 billion Vietnamese dong. This is unlikely to have a significant impact on the market due to the limited size of the stimulus package. Patsurang Desha Putharangsi reports.
China's new president, Mr. Xi Jinping, is set to visit Russia and other African countries soon. More details are coming up right after this break.